We're going to do a lamination now, and what that is we're going to take a piece of granite and glue it to the bottom of the granite so that it gives the appearance of being twice as thick as it is. This is a 2 centimeter granite, so by doing this we're going to make a 4 centimeter thickness, so the granite's going to look like it's 1 5/8 inch thick. The first part of this is we need to make a straight cut. If you make a nice clean cut and glue it on underneath, you're going to have virtually no finish work on this before you start doing your edge. Whereas if it's off, then you're going to have to grind it in so that it's all centered and all on line. What we've done to prep this is we've used a square and a China marker to mark the line on our granite, and then we've put masking tape down to the part of the granite we're going to be keeping. The reason for this is when we're cutting this, we're going to use this skill saw with the diamond blade against this level as a straight edge guide, and some of this stone, when it gets ground up, is going to get caught underneath this skill saw. What we don't want to do is create deep scratches in this already polished flat surface, because those are tougher to deal with than the edge design that we're going to be making on it. Now I have here a Skill HD77 worm drive skill saw with a thin rimmed, fairly tight comb turbo blade with a soft bond for granite. The first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that this blade is at a 90-degree angle to the plate. And I'm going to do that by just taking a square and holding it against the plate. And I don't know if you can see this, so let me turn this upside down. And I'm going to put this up against it and basically look at the reveal here and see that this one is not quite right. So let me mess with it just a little bit. And again, this blade has to come out. That's too far the other way. That looks good. And the reveal is there. See, now according to the guide on this, we're actually just over 0. So I never trust the guides on these. They're close enough for lumber, but on granite I want to be even closer. So now I have that set, and I have this mark. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to measure where I'm going to put the guide by laying this down at the cut. The cut will be there. Now I have that one in place. I'm going to go ahead and clamp it. Now I'm going to take the skill saw to the other end, but I'm not going to turn it around because, as you notice, it's only about 1 inch to this side of the plate, and it's about 4 inches to this side of the plate. So I'm going to hold it in place and get the blade right up to where I want to make my cut. And then I'm going to look down and make sure it's pointing in the right direction, obviously. Now I'm going to go ahead and clamp this. Okay, now that I have my guide in, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to check it again. Okay, I'm checking my measurements again, and this side is good. I'm going to this side now, and that side's good. So now I should get nice straight cuts. So now I'm going to go ahead and lay this over here. I'm going to make sure these are nice and tight so they don't move. And I'm going to get my extension cord. And my dust mask. It's highly recommended that you wear one of these. I've done it without, and let me tell you, you pay for it the next day or two. And now the last trick with using a skill saw for straight cuts, and this is one that a lot of people don't tell you, is that a skill saw cuts from the bottom up through the front. So since granite has a lot of different rocks in it, let's say there's a piece of quartz near the surface. If you push the skill saw through there and you catch that quartz, what it can do is pop and give you a chip that you don't want to have to deal with. We're going to pull it backwards through there, and what that allows is you're cutting down and into the stone rather than up and out of the stone. So when it hits that same piece of quartz, it's got the full weight of the granite behind it to support it, so it cuts it rather than pops it out and makes a chip. So let's cut it. Okay, now we have a nice straight piece that we can use for our lamination. Here's what I'm using for this. I'm using epoxy, latex gloves so I don't get the epoxy on me, a non-wax paper cup to mix it in, tongue depressors for mixing and application to the stone, and razor blades for scraping it off. Once I put this in place, I will be C-clamping it. This is a 2-to-1 epoxy, 2 parts A to 1 part B. And we're not going to worry about getting it exactly right. We're just going to get it close enough for our work application. And normally it takes about 2 to 3 minutes to mix this. In fact, it says on here, thoroughly mix for 3 minutes. And you'll know when it's getting ready to apply because the cup will get hot in your hand because of the chemical reaction caused by the epoxy. What we're going to do is we're going to take it and we're going to apply it to the big piece and see what our coverage looks like, and then also apply some to the other piece, and then we're going to razor blade it so we can fill all gaps. You want to make sure that you razor blade this now, because if you wait till tomorrow, once this epoxy is all cured, it won't come off with a razor blade. It'll be too hard. It'll be harder than the granite itself when it's fully cured. The more epoxy you mix at once, the quicker it will gel. The bigger the mass, the quicker the chemical reaction. We're only mixing a small amount, but I can still feel it starting to get warm. We're using a flowing epoxy. It's kind of syrupy. I can feel it starting to get hot. So I'm going to go ahead and start applying this to the stone. Okay. I'm going to very carefully and now I'll start razor blading, and you basically just keep razor blading it until there's no glue oozing out anymore. And you can expect to go through razor blades here and rubber gloves. What this also does is it allows you to make sure that the pieces are sitting correctly, because when you're razor blading both sides at the same time, if they're not sitting correctly, it's going to be rather obvious to you. And the more that you can get set up correctly, obviously, the less you'll have to clean up later with grinding cups and polishing pads and all that. And remember, don't think for a second, I'll just finish it tomorrow, because tomorrow this stuff will be harder than that granite. by running this razor blade over there just before it's too gummy to do anything with. I'm actually moving it to fill cracks so that I don't have to do repair works on it later. Alright, let's let it dry and we'll check it out. Okay, so now this is your laminated edge. And so what we've done is we've given the stone the appearance of being twice as thick, and we've left a nice flat one plane front on it that will require minor cleanup, and depending on what kind of a contour you're going to put on this, no cleanup whatsoever, because it is smooth enough to run a router bit down. It is all on one plane. And there are no apparent holes in there to fill right now. So now you're ready to go ahead and prepare that. But that's how you do a lamination, and that when that thing cures, which won't be till tomorrow, mind you, it's dry, but it won't be cured till tomorrow, it'll be stronger than the actual granite it's holding in place. While you would never epoxy a backsplash to a slab if the backsplash was against a wall, because you would just caulk it, this is going to be a freestanding center at the office that we're going to put our coffee machine on. So we are going to put this up as a backsplash, and we are going to glue it so it becomes a part of this material. Once again, I have out my epoxy, which I'm going to go ahead and mix. Put the part A in first. And again, the more epoxy you mix at the same time, the quicker it reacts, the more the mass. And this is not going to be nearly enough B. This is the hardener, so I'm going to go ahead and get out some more hardener. And again, I'm going to put in some of that puff cream, because it's the closest thing I have to matching this color. This color is made by American Stone. It is epoxy based, so no matter how much you use, it'll never dilute your glue. And I had a popsicle stick, which I will use to mix this with. Now, if you look at the edge, you'll see that we roughed it up a little bit, and we did this so that the epoxy would bond better, because the epoxy is not going to suck into a polished surface nearly as well as one that's roughed up. So we roughed up this edge, and the cut piece underneath is roughed up also, so we're going to go ahead and glue that. Now, since I cut this and I'm not a professional, it's not going to be at a 90 degrees to the tabletop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these horseshoe shims here to set it right so that it is at a 90 degree. So now I'm mixing the epoxy, because you're supposed to mix this for 3 to 4 minutes, and you can see the color is a cream buff colored, so which is the closest color we have, and will look better where it appears on the stone than if I used no color or if I used a dark color. We do sell these colors individually as well as in coloring kits, and if you're using an epoxy, we always recommend using the epoxy based, as again, it doesn't dilute your stone. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and start setting this on here. Let me pull this out of the way so you can see. I have newspaper underneath. You definitely want to expect this to be sloppy. The better your coverage, the better the adhesion. Okay, now that ain't going nowhere. Now let me pop this up. You can see this is not at a good angle, so I'm going to go ahead and shim this. Now I'm coming around to that side. And that now appears to be a 90, or darn close to it if it's not. Because I cut it so badly, I don't have any leakage out the front, but that's okay. When this is done, you'll be able to lift this by this piece, because it'll support. It'll be the bond that we're making is actually stronger than the granite that's underneath it. Now all that'll remain with this piece is I'll have to grind down the front edge, put a bevel on it or a bull nose on it, grind this edge off to get the magic mark off it, and polish this edge out. So that's now it's just a matter of waiting. I'm not going to do anything with this for at least 2 hours, because in these 2 hours I can screw it up, but I can't fix anything. So, but once this stuff sets up, it'll be permanent. And you always want to laminate granite or glue granite with epoxy, and you always want to laminate marble or travertine with either an acrylic mastic like our crystal or with a polyester resin. The reason you use epoxy on granite, it gives you the permanent bond, and the reason you don't use polyester on granite is it won't adhere to the silica substrates that are in the granite, so that's why you don't get a solid bond with it. I mean, you could do a lamination in poly and it might last forever, or 4 years from now somebody be standing there and that lamination drop off and chop somebody's foot right off, and it can happen. So you want to make sure that you follow the Marble Institute of America's guidelines on all this. I think that's it for right now, Kenny. We'll come back and look at this when it's dry. Now I'm going to go ahead and use polyester glue to seam these two pieces of granite together. And the first thing I did was I dry fitted the slabs and used shims. You can see one or two of them sitting there on top of the counter to make sure they were both on one plane. Then I mixed up the polyester resin, which is a two-part glue. You use 3% of the hardener to 97% of the resin,
And I'm going to take a putty knife and I'm going to butter the inside edge of the piece that's not moving. And I'm just going to apply it on here liberally. We're not using this for anything structural. If the joint breaks, the slab's not going to fall up. We're just using it to join the two pieces, and then we'll apply a top coat on this of color to match the stone itself. So now I've got it pretty well buttered up here. Put a little more and run it down. Coverage looks good. Maybe I should put a little more right here. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and butt these two pieces together, and they're not quite on one plane yet, but they're close. Let's get a putty knife out here and scrape off this excess. Okay. Now I'm cleaning it up with a cloth and some denatured alcohol, and then you can't see it as well as I can, but there's still a gap in there. So first thing I want to do is get everything back on one plane. You can tell by the reflection it's not. So let's fasten the front, and then we're going to take a piece in the back here, piece of wood, and brace it against the window frame and pop everything back down on the one plane again. Let me pop that in there and we'll test it. And it's closer. We're not quite there yet. That's pretty good in the back. Still got a little bit up front. Let's tighten that up just a little bit. And that looks pretty good. And you see me we're running a finger over this. We're checking for lippage. And that's good. Okay, now we're going to let this sit for a few minutes dry. In about 10 minutes it'll be dry. Then I'm going to go ahead and put a top coat on here and fill that deep gap. Now you can see overhead that you got a lot of space, a lot of gap in that seam. So we're going to pop this on here just to fill the gap. We're still going to top coat it with a color, which we'll do next, but let's go ahead and fill the deep gaps right now. And this polyester is about done with its drying time. It's starting to get like jello. So on there, and we'll razor blade off the excess. Yeah, it's like jello. Pretty soon it'll be like peanut butter. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and apply the top coat with color. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mask this off and make a dam with the masking tape. Basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to put masking tape 1/8 of an inch on either side of the seam, and which will leave a 1/4 inch gap with the seam right in the middle of it. Then I'm going to go ahead and mix up some more of that polyester resin. Then I'm going to put dark brown color on it, which is going to match the base coat of this stone. Mix up the color and the resin first, and then I'm going to take the hardener, put it in there, and just mix it together. And what this will do is it'll give me you're gonna see the seam. By taking the base coat of the stone, the seam is less obvious, and this is the top coat, which will actually act as the joint between both pieces of the slab, so that there's no lippage, so that it's all on one plane and you can't feel it when you run your fingers over it. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab a razor blade and just apply this right over that entire area and on both sides where the masking tape is. I'm going to pop that on there. Make sure I get some good coverage. And this is the actual part that's putting the color into the glue. This part's a little bit trickier. Let me just put some glue in here and then rub it in with my finger. And I'm not worried about the excess, I'll just razor blade it off. I'm going to let this sit for about 5 to 10 minutes till it gets hard, and that's all it's going to take. Alright, now we took the masking tape off and we've got this 1/4 inch wide brown seam that we're going to scrape off. And what I've done is taken a clean razor blade, I've got the sharp edge touching the granite on either side of the seam, and I've got it pointing straight up and down, so the blade is actually at 90 degrees to the granite, and I'm scraping back and forth. I don't want to do this at a 45-degree angle because I don't want to rip the polyester out of the seam. I want to basically grind everything down to the granite. The razor blade isn't going to cut the granite, and since it'll put everything on the same plane, when you're done with this, you'll have the slab leads right over the filler and right to the other slab, so you won't even be able to feel it if it's done correctly. Again, I'm just cleaning this up with a rag that's got alcohol on it, and I'm just going back and forth and scraping off the excess, and it just scrapes away. Again, this is just the top coat to put color into this, which helps it to blend better. Remember, you'll always be able to see the seam that you made, but if you do it right, your guess won't. It'll just be a part of the stone. It'll look natural. Or nearly natural, I should say. Some of it scrapes better than others, I guess. And now it's getting down to where all you've got left, you can see that small line. Let's get a good shot of this here. Okay, and there you can see how small that seam is. Come back to it. So that's what you're looking for, that 1/16 of an inch seam with color that blends into the natural color of the stone. That pretty much takes care of that. Okay, now on this part here, we're going to do it a little bit differently. I'm still not running at a 45-degree angle over the seam. I'm scraping over the granite up to the seam. It's a little trickier because there's a joint there, but we'll make it work. And remember, if you mess this up, all you got to do is mix up a little bit more glue and do it again. And that's it. What we're going to do is we're going to show you how to use polyester resin and other glue for repairing a crack and for fixing the seam, which if you listen you can hear that I'm hitting the seam with my thumbnail as opposed to here where I'm rolling right over it and it's not hitting anything, and then you got a crack here. So what we're going to do is, this is polyester resin and you mix 3% hardener with it, and we're just going to glue this around and mix it up. Once we got it mixed, we'll have roughly 4 or 5 minutes to apply it. So I'm not mixing very much because in 10 minutes this will be like rubber. It won't be mixable at all. Now this will dry clear and fairly transparent. It won't dry brown like some do, so therefore it won't discolor the stone. It'll be like putting clear glass on it for all intents and purposes. Okay, now that I've got it mixed, I'm going to take out a razor blade. I'm going to try to take out a razor blade. I'm going to take out a razor blade. And first I'm going to fill this hole. It'll be like it never existed. And then I'm going to start in the back and just work forward with this. Cleanup with this is just alcohol. Alright, now let me go grab another, let me just wipe it off with this. Don't like the way I finished that one, so let me pop a little bit on there again. Okay, I'm going to go grab another razor blade and I'll be right back.
Oops.
I'm just getting any excess off. And that's that. Now I'll let it dry and I'll hit it with some steel wool, which will buff it out. And that's all there is to it. Cut it. Alright, we've got a slab in place here and we're going to show you how to do a repair on a piece of cracked granite. This granite crack runs here to here and back to the seam, and then it runs from here, it's black so it's hard to see, then it runs from here out along my finger. And it runs out a pretty good distance. I think it ends here. And it runs out a pretty good distance. I'm still tracing it. And it looks like we have fault here, but I don't know if it's cracked through. The problem with a crack like this is it's going to keep getting bigger unless we do something to prevent it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to try to put a penetrating epoxy into the crack, and then once we have strengthened the granite, preventing it from cracking further, then we're going to use polyester over the top to make it so that you don't feel the crack. The first thing I want to do with penetrating epoxy when I apply it to granite is I want to color test it to make sure it doesn't color enhance the granite. Because if it color enhances the crack, no matter how much it's sealed, the crack is going to stand up more than it does now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some masking tape and I'm going to put together a little patch about an inch long on this crack. And we're going to put it a little on one side and on the other side. And then we'll go right across it. And basically what we're creating here is a dam
so that the epoxy will fill this little rectangle that I've left open, but none of the rest of it, making it easy to tell if we've can proceed with this for the rest of it. Okay, so now I've got that part taken care of. Almost. You're still changing out the lights there, right? There's two. That one. Okay. And now we're going to have to mix some polyester, or some epoxy. Okay, now, we're going to mix up a batch of penetrating epoxy. This is used for filling cracks because it is, the viscosity on it, it's more like water than other epoxies. Than traditional stone weld, for instance, is pretty heavy. And let me show you that again. This is regular stone weld, and you can see how slow that is to flow. And this is what we're going to use now, and it moves like water. So it will allow it to sink into the stone and penetrate through the crack. Now we've already looked underneath this. Were the granite visible from underneath, we would tape the bottom of it to keep it from just basically dripping through the granite. But there's plywood underneath this granite, so we're not going to worry about that. We're just going to let it sink in, and if it runs to the plywood, it's not going to hurt the plywood. I'm putting on latex gloves because I don't want to get epoxy on my hands. It can be corrosive. Some people are allergic to it, but frankly, it's a bear to get off, even with alcohol. So, all right. Now, this is a 2-to-1 mixture, 2 parts of part A and 1 part of part B. And the penetrating we have, it actually comes in these neat little bottles that work like this. You squeeze it, and it fills up this side. And then we'll pour it in here. And we'll go 2 of these, so we're putting 1 ounce of this in. And now we're going to put a 1/2 ounce of part B in. And the more you mix of epoxy at a time, the faster it will set up. The bigger the mass, the quicker the chemical reaction. This stuff will actually stay fairly soft enough to razor blade off tomorrow. We're going to try to get it hard enough to do it today, but we're not going to rush this thing. You mix it for a couple of minutes in the cup, and then we're just going to apply it on this and let it sit and go to our next project, and we'll come back when it's dried off and we can test if it has changed the color of the rest of the stone. It says on the directions here to mix this for 2 to 3 minutes, so that's what we're going to do. I'm mixing it in a non-wax paper cup with a tongue depressor. Don't mix it in a plastic cup because it'll melt the plastic once it starts to achieve peak temperature because of the chemical reaction. Don't mix it in the styrofoam cup for the same reason. Now, the more of part B you mix with it, the faster it will set up, but that can also make it not as strong, so I don't want to over mix it. And I'm just waiting for the cup to get warm to the touch. I don't feel it yet. Okay, it's starting to get warm to the touch. I can feel it in my hand right through the cup. So the gel time on a regular epoxy is only 15 minutes or so. The gel time on this stuff can be a lot longer. So I'm just going to mix it for a little bit longer and make sure that it's getting hot before I let it put in there. And what it's going to do is it's going to go, I'm going to fill that well that I created with the masking tape, and it's going to soak into the crack and disappear out of the well. And then what I'll be able to do is I'll be able to rip off the masking tape and see if it changed the color of the stone. That's how we're going to color test this little patch right here. And here we go. And I'm just going to basically drip this on. And that's that. Now, in a few minutes, this will be too hard to mess with. I'm going to go ahead and take these gloves off and throw them in the trash can. And we're going to let this set up, and then we'll come back to this project. Okay, we're going to go back to this original test here that we did on the epoxy. And bear in mind, this epoxy is still liquid. It's gelling now, so it's not nearly as viscous as it was when I poured it. It's not nearly as liquid as it was when I poured it. And I'm putting on my rubber gloves, my latex gloves. Again, we did this only to color test it to make sure that we weren't going to color enhance the stone, because we don't want to do that, because then we're just making the crack show up more. So let's pop this off. And it bled right underneath it, which is not a good thing. Alright, that's in the garbage. Stay. Okay, now we'll... And it's gelling, but it's pretty liquid, so we get out some more razor blades. Gotta have razor blades to work with this stuff. I don't see that it changed the color of the stone at all. In fact, I can't even tell where we put it on, which is a good thing. So we're going to go ahead and tape this whole sucker up and put penetrating in there and let it sit overnight, and I'll razor blade it off in the morning. Okay, so we have a masking tape well around this crack, and as you can see, this crack, it starts here and goes back to here. Then it comes out from there, goes out here, splits, there's another crack there, and it runs all the way up here, and this is the end of the crack as we see it. Now we're going to put this penetrating epoxy in there so we can seal this crack so that it won't crack any further. And basically, now that we've color tested the granite and we know that we're not going to change the color of it, I'm going to go ahead and mix a new batch. And there we go. I'm going to mix 4 part A's. And I need a paper towel. That's good. Go ahead. Ready?
Yep.
Okay. And these are neat because they come in special boxes that make it a piece of cake to mix perfect size batches. Okay, now I've got a 6 ounces here, which is 4 ounces of part A and 2 ounces of part B. And I'm going to put this here. And now I'm going to go ahead and mix it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to drop it on here and let it fill up our well. And then we're going to let it soak into the stone. And then when it hardens up, I'm going to razor blade it off. And if we need to, we'll put a polyester fill over the top of it. But what this will do is, by allowing this epoxy to penetrate the crack and go down into the stone, it will adhere to both sides and act like a bond between them, therefore strengthening the integrity of the stone and stopping it from continued cracking. Okay, I've been mixing this stuff for 3 minutes and it stinks. And it's getting warm. I can feel it right through the cup. So I'm going to start putting it in here. And you got a chip in here, and I'm going to fill the chip for the same reason. I want to make sure it stays a chip and doesn't get any bigger. As long as it's covering the crack, I'm happy, because that means that it'll work its way into the granite. Of course, it's hard for me to do this because I suffer from CSS. I can't see stuff. Oh, this is where we got that new crack coming up, isn't it? Okay. This is the end of crack number 1 and the beginning of crack number 2. And there's actually crack number 3 in here too. It'd probably be easier if this was a white granite or a light colored granite. I'd probably be able to see the crack better, but we're finding it. It's just slow progress, but that's okay. And right now it just looks like a big mess, but what we're doing is making this granite so that it'll still last, as opposed to this crack getting bigger until it splits into 2 pieces. Wow. Let's make sure I got it all.
Okay, it looks like we've got the crack completely covered by the epoxy. Now we're going to let the epoxy penetrate into the stone, and then we'll end up pulling the tape, razor blading it off, and seeing if we need to do a top seam. But at least we've stopped this crack from going any further. This is roughly 15 hours later. This particular epoxy sets up very slow, and if you did this with the regular epoxy and came back 15 hours later and tried to razor blade the excess off, you'd break razor blades on it. It'd be way too hard. But this one won't have that problem, and that's why I wanted to wait until it's set up. That allows it to fill as much of the crack as it can, because it goes right through the crack and into the stone, thus strengthening this stone. So let me pull all this off. And this particular epoxy won't actually be completely cured for about 72 hours, although there will come a point today where it'll be too hard to mess with it all. It would have been nice if I could have just used one long piece of masking tape, but unfortunately this crack zigzagged and that wasn't possible. This just means it'll create more work now. But it shows you where the crack on this was. It was a pretty involved crack. Now there's lots of things that could have made this crack. It could have been set badly. It could have had 150-pound kids jumping up and down on it. There's a lot of reasons that this crack could have developed. None of them are good reasons. But we want to make sure that we stop it from cracking further. And the quicker that you seal one of these cracks, the quicker you'll prevent it from spreading. And if you don't prevent it from spreading, sooner or later you're going to wind up with two pieces of granite where there used to be one. And we filled in this well, and that looks like it took pretty well. Lots of cleanup between the tape and the epoxy. Okay, now let's get out my razor blades and get at it. See, I wanted it to be hard enough to do this, or soft enough to do this, but hard enough that it wasn't liquid still. So looks like we timed it right where we wanted to. Yeah, have plenty of razor blades around because once they gum up, they're shot. Alright, let's cover this end. That end came out nice. Okay. From this angle, you can see the fill. Can you see the fill from that angle?
Mm-hmm.
We don't even have to top coat this one. And because that dries clear, it's a grayish color, so if you really look for it, you can still see it, but it's not going to get any bigger, and it'll never crack in the same place, because once this epoxy is cured, it will actually be harder than this granite. So it may crack again, but it won't crack on the same fault line that it was on before. don't like the way this came out. This is that hole that I patched. But I can't feel it as much as I did before either, so it worked. It's just but this is a good thing to know how to do, because most granite shops, if this happens, are going to tell you to replace the slab. And when you replace a slab like this, you end up having to take it off the counters, and sometimes you ruin the counters, so you end up replacing your whole kitchen. Then your significant other gets involved and decides that your appliances are no good, so you end up replacing the appliances. And it's good to know how to do this yourself, because it'll save you thousands of dollars redoing your entire kitchen, because no real fabrication shop is ever going to come out and repair something that was somebody else's fault, whether it's another fabricator's or yours, because it's very difficult to make it look right. And in that line of work, reputation is everything. Alright, now I clean this off with a little bit of that alcohol. And if we were going to top fill it, we'd have to wait, because it's not cured yet, and because I don't want to try to put polyester over alcohol. The alcohol dries right away, and unlike Windex, it doesn't deteriorate the stone over time. Alright, we have successfully sealed and filled this crack and strengthened the stone. I'll show you how to repair this. This has, I don't know how to make this show up on camera. Right here, there's some scratches on it. You getting those? Okay, and if you can see from the angle, there's no gloss there. They're a little bit rough, but we're going to show you how to use the ager and a toothpick. And do is we're going to take the ager, and we don't want to get it everywhere. We just want to get it where the scratches are. That's why the toothpick. And we're going to go over it really lightly. Because this will hide those scratches. And it flows through that area, because that's a low spot, obviously. And then I'm going to take a clean rag and I'm just going to dab it off. One more really slight scratch there that I wanted to fix. So if you were to have a long scratch in travertine, for instance, and I'm wearing the glove because it is solvent based, and I'm going to put this on this half, and this will slightly darken the stone and bring out the natural color in it. You want to do this outdoors because of the vapors involved.
Now this is the Hydrex. This is the one that won't change the shade or the color or anything. When it dries, it's invisible. Just stain proofs your stone. The way these work is they fill the micropores in the stone, impregnating it and protecting the stone from having any other foreign materials come inside that, including liquids. Now I'm just going to go ahead and take a clean dry rag and wipe off any excess for the purpose of a test. You would normally let this dry. The ager will take overnight before it's really dry, and the Hydrex will take like 5 minutes. You don't want to use, once you use the ager, you don't need to use the Hydrex, and once you use the Hydrex, the ager won't work. So you want to make sure that if you're going to change any of your shades, you do it first. Okay, now we're going to give it the red wine test just to show you what this stuff really does. This is a Costco 2000 vintage Kenwood Merlot that I'm pouring on there. Now we're in regular stone, this would be very porous. You can see it beating up and pulling towards level. And we'll let that sit there for a minute. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and drain this off now. And now I'm going to take another clean dry rag and just wipe it. And you'll notice that it beaded right up on that and that there is no stain on this stone. So this is the advantage of using a sealer. Now we didn't seal the side, so if you see the leakage in there, that's why. But once you apply this, it's fairly permanent. We recommend applying 2 coats, waiting 6 months and applying a 3rd coat, and then maintenance as needed. But realistically, you could put this in a shower, apply it right the first time, which is 2 full coats, and not have to mess with it again for years. So, but as you can see, the stone, the only difference in the stone at all right now is this one's a little bit darker hue than this one. That's because this had the color enhancing ager and this just had the invisible Hydrex. But the wine didn't stain at all. So this is a feature that you get from using these sealers. We're going to seal this countertop now with Hydrex. This is a impregnating sealer that when it dries is completely invisible. It won't affect the shine, it won't enhance the color, but what it does do is it makes your stone stain proof. So if you spill red wine on it or orange juice on it, it's going to sit there and bead up until you wipe it off. It also will help resist calcium deposits, which can be beneficial if you've got hard water like we do here in Arizona. There's a couple of ways you can put it on. Some people paint it on with the brush. I just use a rag, but I keep changing to a clean part of the rag. And the way this stuff works is if you can see the stone is wet, you've got coverage. So you see me getting low on the stone like that because I'm checking the reflection to make sure that it's wet. And then we're going to give it 2 coats.
But this will give you an idea, because this counter is probably 3 to 4 foot wide and over 10 foot long. So this will give you an idea how much time you're going to invest in this. Again, if the stone is wet, you've got coverage. You don't have to pour it on, you don't have to overdo it. We're going to give it 2 coats. Now, unlike other sealers that go on and leave a greasy or filmy coat on there, this goes on and stays, it goes on and it dries. Provided your surface is clean, it dries completely and invisibly. Okay, that's coat 1. Let's see if it's dry yet. Partially dry. So we're going to let it dry for a couple of minutes here. Okay, we're going to give this coat number 2. And again, we're just looking for coverage. If the stone is wet, we've got coverage, and that means that it will absorb into the stone and seal it. And what Hydrex does, if you want to get into the scientifics about it, is it is a mineral or a solvent-based. Is it solvent-based or mineral-based? I don't remember. It's a solvent-based sealer that soaks up and clogs the mini pores in the granite. It's water and oil proof, and the first time you spill red wine on a piece of white marble or granite and you've got this on there, you'll be so glad you took the 10 minutes to seal your stone. You could wear rubber gloves with this. I didn't. It doesn't hurt my hands, but I will wash and then put some kind of a lanolin-based hand lotion on, because the mineral spirits in there, they do have a tendency to want to eat your skin. And that's it. Now we just wait for it to dry. And that's how tough that was to seal that granite. But it protects it, makes it stain proof, and it's a real good idea, and it's cheap. So you might want to protect your investment that way. If you can see on this camera, the granite right here has basically lost its high gloss. It's still got a little bit of shine. I can see the reflection of the light through it, but it's not a mirror type finish like the granite over here is a highly polished finish.
This can happen through wear, water buildup, you know, just general abrasion over the course of years. But we're going to use polisher, or rather a grinder with a backing pad and a felt wheel and some Diaglo diamond buffing powder from Abrasive Technology. Now the first thing I want to do is I want to take my grinder, which is a variable speed, and I want to set this to a low speed. Do not try this at 10,000 RPM with a $50 grinder. It will not work properly. Then I'm going to take a rigid backing pad that has no flex to it. The reason we're using rigid is we're just going to do a flat one plane surface. So now I'm putting the backing pad on here, and I'm going to get a felt pad. We sell these. They're made by Alpha Professional. This is a 5-inch felt pad. It has a Velcro back on it, so it'll stick to this Velcro face, and it's basically a 1/4-inch thick felt pad. Pop that on here like this. Now we're all set up, got our tools, it's ready to run. So we're good to go there. Again, I want to make sure it's on speed 1, which it is. Okay. Now we're going to take Diaglo, and this is a diamond powder. And basically we're just going to take some of this, and then we're going to spread it out where we want to try to work on this. Now, I've never used this before, so I'm not really sure the amount to use, but you know what? We're going to find out. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to spray a light mist of water over this, just to help hold it in place. You can see it's making a paste, which is what we want. Now I want to get a little bit more moisture on this.
I'm already seeing results, but I want to hit this one more time. Well, let's wipe it off and see what we got. Definitely enhanced the polish. Now this has a glow to it. We're going to use the light Diaglow for light granite on this piece of stone. I'm trying to make the sun reflect so that you can see how dull the finish is on this. And now I'm going to get my grinder out, and this is the Diaglow compound for light granite. Oh. So now I'm going to sprinkle this Diaglow right on the stone. Now I'm going to mist it. And I'm going to turn this down to 1. And try to muck it up into a paste.
more coat, or one more application. And let's see if I can get this on camera so you can see the difference.